are talking precisely about my heritage language learning journey, Chinese. Heritage language learning has definitely changed the game for me in terms of my mentality that I go into learning languages, as well as a self-development tool and finding ways that I can get to know myself better, even the parts of myself that I feel a lot of shame about, which we are going to talk about in a second, because heritage language learning is definitely different from language learning in general. There are very different nuances that one will definitely experience when they have such a complicated tie to a culture or a society. There are a lot of definitions for what heritage language is. I will definitely link a video in the description so you can see how different the experiences that heritage language learners can have. It's important to me though, just to make you guys aware that in my channel name, Language Travel Adoptee, obviously I am adopted from China specifically. This year I started to learn my heritage language, Chinese, and even though my native language is English, my first language was always Chinese because that is the language that I came home speaking automatically after I was adopted as a baby. So going back to learning such a language and having all of this mixed up emotions, it's a very tough experience to have. The fact that I'm learning Chinese right now as an adult means that I have to confront my past and I have to confront adoption that surrounded my past. I have to confront the mystery of not knowing what happened to me before 2 years old or who my biological parents were. I feel like there is not enough talk about it in the language community, and that's what I am here to really shed light on today. Now, I am a still complete beginner in the Chinese language. I started about 5 months ago and took a lot of breaks in between because this process of learning a heritage language is something that I don't want to feel rushed to do. I don't want to rush to a certain proficiency level in a certain period of time. I'm also limiting my resources, so right now I'm only using Pimsleur Chinese to learn it. My whole life, I had never wanted to learn Chinese actually because I'd faced a lot of racism from people making fun of me of my appearance and just using the language or a fake version of the language against me in order to mock me and how I looked. You can check out my adoption story where I go more into that side of language learning. I maintain is not always a positive experience. It doesn't have to be. We can definitely have very complicated relationships with languages that don't have immediate solutions. The solution that I have found for myself as a heritage language learner with this complicated story behind me is knowing that I can use the language to the culture that I lost as a tool to heal, even though it is one of the hardest things that I have ever found the strength to do, honestly. There's a lot of grief, shame, a lot of disconnect, as I had said before, with the culture and the people, and in my case, the access that I lost. You know, anytime I learn absolutely any other language, I never think, well, I wish I were a native speaker, this would be easier. However, I know that I would have been a native speaker of Chinese. So when I do think about, oh, well, that natural process of picking up Chinese in the natural way was taken from me, and now I have to learn it in an unnatural way. Now, before sharing my reflections, I do want to specify too, I don't identify myself as Chinese at all, since the United States and the life that I've had here is what I have always known. But even as I've been opening myself up gradually, learning Chinese over these last 5 months, I am now finally emotionally and psychologically more open to exploring a past that I know that I will never have back. It's painful to think about the what ifs, but right now I am just existing in this messy space of coming to terms with the fact that there really is no right answer to approach language learning sometimes, especially when it deals with a heritage language. So of all of my reflections, first one is knowing that yes, Chinese is considered, for native speakers of English, one of the hardest languages that you have to put the most time in. However, I will say nothing has been harder. I know not even Chinese will be harder than what I've already gone through with reconciling what learning this heritage language means for me and really processing nuanced emotions that I will be feeling as I go through learning the actual language. I think we can all relate to a certain level on organizing and having fun looking at different language learning study routines and which resources to pick from. I had so much fun doing that with any other language except for Chinese. I have purposely not learned anything about the Chinese language or Chinese culture to protect myself, opening myself up emotionally to that. And the same thing with Chinese. I'm approaching this language in the safest way that I know possible, which is just narrowing down to one resource, not worrying about how I'll learn it the most efficiently to reach this level in the specific amount of time. Chinese is definitely going to be the hardest language for me to learn, not because of the proficiency level, but because of the intense emotional periods that I had to take before even learning Chinese to process and how I wanted it to define me going into the future. The second realization I had, language can be so healing and it can also be traumatizing. I talked about, some of the racism even growing up when I was talked to in this sort of fake Chinese and just people using the tool of language, unfortunately, to put someone else down. Even as I learn the correct tones and I hear native Chinese people talking in Chinese now with the audio and see the Chinese characters written more, makes me remember all the times that I was mocked through a language that actually has a lot of beauty to it. And I know that for other language learners, even if they aren't heritage language learners, they find a lot of beauty in that language. So I just find that such a shame that people would use language in that way against another person. However, learning Chinese has been the most healing because it is the language that emotionally I had the most mental hurdles to. Me saying this year, okay, I think I'm ready to embark on this journey and break down some of those hurdles and barriers in my head. That was healing for me because it built up a lot of self-trust in the end. Even going through the process of learning the actual language right now, I know that this self-trust will just keep unfolding. The biggest gift, learning Chinese specifically, has helped me humanize people. And this goes really deep, you guys. I'm going like super deep and kind of all over the place in this video, but for heritage language, it is so hard to sum up and nicely package it because your emotions just feel all over the place. However, I feel that with Chinese, knowing that I had, as a kid, subconsciously, a lot of emotions inside me that I was just not ready to deal with, and growing up with all of these insecurities, even just outside of my adoption, right? I just wasn't ready to process even another layer of, frankly, trauma, subconsciously always knowing that I wanted to form a mental barrier through all of my childhood, not defining myself as Chinese anything, not wanting to associate with the language at all, not really wanting to know any culture about really anything of Asia. I mean, that is how much I was protecting myself and coping with the very big feeling of loss and grief. When we are traumatized, there are triggers for us, and these triggers make us dehumanize others because you are trying to protect yourself. That is the only thing you can think about, is putting yourself first. And it's not our fault if we are in survival mode, right? We need to do what we need to do. However, that does lead to a specific dehumanization of people. It was easier for me to stereotype like my own race, like the same Asian people that I, for others who don't know me at all, would be wanting to associate me with. Even though I was trying to protect myself by not wanting to have any contact with any Asian looking person at all throughout my life and using that as a barrier to protect myself, but also backfired because I was limiting myself purposefully. But learning Chinese has been such a beautiful gift of rehumanizing people, not just knowing about the culture and the customs, but when you are processing trauma like this and you're doing it through learning a foreign language, it is a beautiful thing to realize, oh, all of my life, I've been dehumanizing these people to protect myself, and now I'm finally ready to see what they're made up of. That is just a beautiful thing, to be able to use language to build down trauma in that way, and knowing that no, you're not going to be, harmed in any way. You're not in any real danger if you are associating yourself with this other Chinese person who's speaking Chinese to you. Again, that is one of the greatest gifts. Another realization is that by learning Chinese, I've gotten really, really good at figuring out, how can I learn this language in the safest way possible for me right now? We should all be thinking about that question of, how is the safest way for me to approach this while I do something completely new, completely out of my comfort zone? An example of this is finding other, specifically adoptees, who are learning their heritage languages and being a part of that community, and even attending some workshops where they were teaching some of the basics of the Chinese language, but with other people who had similar adoptee background as I did, and I didn't have to explain myself. How to approach and learn a foreign language, and even just do anything scary in general, and make it the safest that you can while still pushing out of your comfort zone a little bit more. That has been such a great skill that I have gotten from Chinese. Another thing is, and I've talked about this before, we don't always have to have positive reasons to learn a language. We can still have uncomfortable emotions that nonetheless inspire us and push us to learn a language. It's not always positive, and it doesn't have to be. And in this way, the feeling of grief was such a powerful motivator for me to even start learning Chinese. I think another really reassuring reflection that I've gotten gotten through all of this is a reminder that there is really no way to go about correctly learning a language. And it feels so freeing. And especially with learning a heritage language, I sense more and more how I do not want the feeling of boxing myself in and limiting myself to just one method. And again, with heritage languages, I think especially with adoptees in a sense, there's so many unpredictables. Again, there are so many unpredictables in language learning in general, and I think us language learners are very resilient in that fact. I think with adoptees, though, there are a lot of what ifs. There are no shoulds or musts. There are so many unpredictable situations, and I think especially with adoptees, not only, oh, what if I were brought up as the native speaker of this and this language, there's also a what if of, for example, what if I met my biological parents? Because most likely those parents would not be able to speak a lot of English. Just knowing that probably in that situation, if I were ever given a choice or a chance to meet my biological parents and speak their language, there are no shoulds or musts in that specific situation. I just know that there would be so many emotional factors in that one interaction that no matter how good or how fluent or how advanced you've reached maybe in one environment, right? Like in a school environment or just talking with other adoptees. I mean, there are just certain situations in life that you can never prepare yourself for, and your body just might go right into fight or flight mode to protect yourself. And that was just one situation that occurred to me where maybe I could use my heritage language, but there would be no right or wrong to go about it. And there would be no right or wrong to categorize what proficiency level I would be at in Chinese, because at that point in that situation, it wouldn't even matter. What would matter would be the more emotional factors surrounding it. If you aren't interested in following more of my reflections, definitely check out this playlist here.